Culture plays a critical role in all of your relationships. It's your responsibility to shape it. Hey everybody, welcome to the Edgy Entrepreneur Podcast. We are deep into season 2 where the discussions are all about relationships, right? Relationships as they are part of your life in every aspect. If you truly desire to become an influential leader in your community, it is super necessary that you master the art of creating really great relationships, whether they be personal or in business. So today we're going to extend this aspect into a little thing called culture. But first, I guess we should introduce ourselves, huh? Who are you?
So my name is Coach Oriana. I'm a life and personal performance coach and a relationship coach as well.
My name is Daniel Tribby. I am a healthcare entrepreneur and also a business advisor to those who are entrepreneurs in healthcare themselves. So yeah, fun topic today. Start us off, Coach. Tell us a little bit about culture and why it seems so boring, but it's definitely not. Give us the deal.
Yes. So we're talking about culture as in your personal culture, your personal relationship culture, which you might not even realize. Most people don't realize that you have a culture, whether you know it or not. Right? There's an environment, there's a feeling that people get when they interact with you in relationships. And so if you know that and you know the components of a culture, then you can more consciously create the culture and the environment that you want to be able to experience and for other people to experience in relationship with you. Just as if you run a business, there is an organizational culture, right? That then there's like teams and systems of people become parts of this organizational culture.
Absolutely.
And so we wanted to talk about it from both perspectives, right? And from the context of all relationships, both personal and professional relationships, and how you really own what that culture looks like, feels like, what experiences people are having in that culture. But most people would say, well, what are the components of a culture? What makes that up, right? Like if I can create it, what are the ingredients?
I love it. And I love the two aspects of relational and organizational. There are two very different things that have a lot of similarities, but also if we use some of the things in our organizational, culture, also in our relational culture, we would probably change the dynamics of a lot of our relationships. We're going to talk about some things that people don't do in each aspect that they should incorporate in those aspects, whether they be relational or organizational.
Well, they're not doing it, and then it's causing an entire series of symptoms that are that are frustrating, right? Are causing breakups in relationships, things like that. So hopefully, once you understand this concept of relational culture, it will help you to understand why you might be experiencing certain types of breakdowns in your relationships, or why you might feel disconnected either in your personal or your professional relationships.
And so we're going to break down these aspects where we're going to talk about what culture actually is, and then we'll break down the relational culture as well as the organizational culture, some of the common problems that we see that people have, and then what are some solutions to fix that. So let's kick this off. What is culture? We spent some time looking at other people's definitions and going, and oh, that sounds good, and this is nice. And then collectively we said, well, this is what we believe. And so what did we come up with? What is culture for us as edgy entrepreneurs?
So we said it's a series of both spoken and unspoken agreements, guidelines, standards, and requirements, and they create a feeling of both alignment and of accountability for you in your relationships, right?
Very good.
And it does that not only for you, but for all of the parties that are involved in that relationship with you, right? So it might be a friend group. A friend group has a culture, right? But even one-on-one with individuals that you might be in relationship with, there's a culture. And if you don't know what it is that you're bringing forward in your personal relational culture, you're just going to drop into the relational culture that another person might bring forward, right? And their relational culture might include things that don't feel good to you, right? Or maybe are even abusive.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about why this matters, like it matters a lot, right? The other thing that I mentioned earlier is it creates a feeling of connection or disconnection. When you're in a relationship and you have a cultural match, it's the same as when you're in a business, like let's say a business that you're working for as an employee. When there's a cultural match, that means that there's a values match, right? That your values, you recognize that they match the organization's values, and you have buy-in, right? That's the other thing. Like you're there, you're not just like the observation, like, oh, my values match theirs. I feel really reinforced and affirmed here. It's like, because my values match theirs, I'm so bought in to the vision and the mission of this organization and what I'm going to help them create, meaning what I bring to the table, right?
Right.
My set of skill sets, talents, gifts, whatever it is that I'm contributing to an organization. And it seems so clear within the context of an employer and employee, right? Like how many of you have worked for an organization and once it wasn't until you were in that you were like, wait a minute, you're not about what you say you're about,
right?
You're not walking the talk, but you had to get behind the curtain before you realized that. But you showed up in that relationship context, which is one of the most important of your life, right? Because you spend so much time at work with like a resume of everything that you have to offer and with so much clarity about what I'm bringing and what I need from you. And then when it comes to personal relationships or even friendships, people don't do that.
It's very strange. I think it's because we put so much weight in, the fact that we need a job, right? Or we have to run the best business possible in order to create revenue so that we can live our life, right? And then it's like because of that demand or that necessity, we don't feel like that we necessarily have to apply the same types of rules or expectations or guidelines to our other personal relationships. And it can cause disconnect or incongruence, right? As we call it, between who you are at work, who you are at home, who you are in the community, or how you're perceived in any one of those groups.
So according to achievers.com, organizational culture is the collection of values, expectations, and practices that guide and inform the actions of all team members. It's a collection of traits that make the company what it is. Culture is created through consistent, authentic behaviors, not press releases and not policy documents, which means you have to walk the talk, right? So a culture is created by the people consistently engaging in certain authentic practices, right, that are aligned with whatever the values and expectations are of the organization. You can't just come forward and say, we value these things as an organization, and then not do them, not actually show that you value that.
Right.
And expect people to still fall in line in their behavior in a certain way.
Yeah, I want to make this really clear for everybody that the culture of your workplace that you establish as the leader beats the shit out of your business strategy every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Okay. So you could have the best strategies in the world, but have a terrible culture and nobody will execute on those strategies. Right. So in order to create a really good culture, you have to define your guidelines. Like what is the guidelines and the expectations and the value systems that you desire your employees to follow. And you have to follow them. It makes no difference if it's the number one earner or performer or the bottom performer or you as the leader, right? You guys have to fall in line under the same guidelines and rules. And when you do that, you end up inspiring people to want to perform because everybody's bought into the system that you designed based upon the culture that you created. Right. So if your culture is one of laziness, right? If you as the leader are showing up late, right? If you as the leader are not being held to your own standards, then you cannot expect other people to hold themselves to that standard either.
That alignment that you talk about is the alignment with the expectations, with the values, which actually feed the company vision and the company's core value system.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then it sounds like you're talking about accountability, right? When you're basically saying you cannot expect people in your organization or on your teams to do things that you're not willing to do or are not doing at all, right? Like if your team starts showing up late and then, but they can fall back on, hey boss, but you show up late.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because I've been in meetings and privy to owners saying these exact words, right? They call out somebody in a group, which is bad culture. Don't do that, okay? Don't call people out in front of a group, in front of their peers. That's a no-no, all right? Do you want to criticize? Do it in private, all right? But don't ever do it in front of your group. But I've heard people call out teammates in a group meeting, and then the other person turns around and says, well, I understand that you want us to do that, but you don't actually do that. And the leader has turned around and said, well, I'm the owner of the company, so I feel like I have a little more leeway. And I'm like, skirt, what? Hold on. You time out. As the leader or the owner or the master or whatever you refer to yourself inside your business, you don't have more leeway. If anything, you have less leeway because everyone's looking to you to set the tone, right? If you establish values, core values for your business, which are super important and you should do, okay? If you haven't done core values work for your business, definitely hire a coach and have somebody help you pick apart your core values and then really institute them inside of your business because it's what people will connect to. You mentioned connecting to a mission and to a vision earlier, and that's what brings people in conjunction and makes them desire to work for you. But then you have to execute on those things, right? I'm sick and tired of people having core values like, we hire integrous people. Well, no shit. Like that should be given, right? I'm not going to say to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hire a bunch of lying weasels to come work for my company. Like nobody's going to do that. Integrity is a given. Okay. So if you're using integrity as a core value, it's not really a core value, right? If core values instill emotion, right? If the core values exist for things like love, contribution, growth-minded, those types of things, instill emotions of people.
We value growing our staff, and then it's impossible to get promoted within the organization, right? Or there's also a narrative that when promotions come up, nobody on the team is good enough. Why is that? Because there is no system of performance management that's grooming people to prepare them to move and transition into the next level of whatever their position is.
Yeah.
Right. So of course now you can't, now there's a vacancy and you can't hire from within because nobody's ready. Right.
Very true.
At the very least, you can't hire from within without experiencing a gap.
So if you're concentrating on your core values, right, and everybody's aligned in those core values, then you have a system of accountability. You mentioned accountability a minute ago. Accountability is important, and it's not just up to the leaders to control accountability. It's up to everyone to hold each other accountable for the value system you have in place. All right. So this is, again, culture trumps any sort of business system every day of the week, twice on Sunday. If my team holds each other accountable to operating at a very high standard, right? That's a powerful culture, okay? And by accountability, it doesn't mean, hey, you're fucking shit up, I need you to do your job better. That's not accountability. Accountability is, hey, you mentioned that you desire to have this done by this date. And now I'm kind of seeing that there's some issues with you possibly meeting that date. So what can I do to help you get there? What can I do to help you get back on track? So I'm holding you accountable, and then I'm offering my expertise or my service or something to help you get back in alignment with the value system and the culture inside of the business. All right. And that accountability does not change based upon your highest performer. I don't care if you have one person out of a team of 12 who brings in 90% of your revenue for you. That person does not get held to any other standard that you would hold the lowest salesperson or the lowest producing person to. Mm-hmm. Everybody's accountable from the top to the bottom.
We brought up organizational culture first because it's the most relatable for most people, right? Either you're a business owner and you are responsible for building an organizational culture once you start growing your business large enough to where you need a team, or even just, maybe you don't even, you're not even bringing on paid people, but if you're even managing like volunteer staff, you have a culture. Right. You're setting a tone, mm-hmm. right? Anybody who works with you, you're setting a tone for how you work with people. And now we want to draw that parallel into your own personal relational culture, right? Which is really important because it makes up the ethos for how you show up in all of your relationships. Like you're showing up. This is the thing about relationships, right? People get offended when anybody else, God forbid, says like, well, what do you bring to the table? That's such an offensive thing or idea. But this idea that people just show up with absolutely nothing to contribute to a relationship and that should be acceptable, quite frankly, that is offensive.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not coming into my life experience to either bring value and because of the kind of person that I am and my ethos, right, to co-create value with me, what are we doing?
And then most people show up with a list of things and materials, right? Oh, I make a certain amount of money. Things, right? I cook. Oh, I clean. Oh, I do laundry. Like that's great. Fantastic. I make plenty of money. I can hire somebody to do that shit for me. Meal prep costs $120 a month. Like what else do you have?
Yeah.
Right? So that relational culture has to be developed around what's the emotional advantage of
Correct.
right of being with you.
Being in a relationship together. And that can be an intimate partnership, or that can be a friendship too.
Facts.
We're talking about platonic relationships as well in our podcast series. We're talking about relationship mastery. That's all relationships, right? You know, we're also could be in the context of a business relationship, right? A business partnership, which oftentimes are two people who are unmarried, but also get themselves into a very deep level of financial commitments and emotional commitments, right? Like you have to know what the hell you're getting into with a certain person. So this is how we defined relational culture. It's very similar to culture, right? It's a collection of values, expectations, agreements, guidelines, standards, and requirements that guide your actions, and they inform other people to pertinent information about who you are and how you are.
Right.
Right. So in order for me to have those things relevant to who I am and how I am, don't I need to know who I am and how I want to show up in the world?
Exactly.
And what experiences that I want to have in relationships, but also on layering that with what experiences do I want other people to have in relationships with me, right? What am I looking to co-create in the world? You got to be able to have clarity on that. And when you do have clarity on that, then not only can you attract people who are aligned with that value system, right? Which means that they're a cultural match to you, to be in relationship with you, but you can also repel people who are not.
Exactly.
Right? Which is so important. When we talk about boundaries, right? A big part of boundaries is attracting and repelling people that are not aligned with you, right? If you cannot respect my boundaries, then we don't need to be in a relationship, right? Whereas if we have alignment in all of these different areas, we actually, the odds that we could co-create something great together are significantly increased.
Absolutely. Yeah, 1,000%. And you're talking about the best definition of marketing on the planet, right? Which is attracting what you want and repelling what you don't. But until you're really clear on what the product is that you have, right, as a person, or the service that you offer as a person, how can you market it? How can you sell it? How can you speak it? Everybody's like, oh, why is he using business terms to describe relationships? I promise you, everything in your life is sales and marketing. Everything. Okay.
And everything in life is a relationship.
Right. Your child is trying to sell you on the new video game that they want, and they're marketing the shit out of it and how great it is. Okay. So it is everything in your life is a relationship, and it usually revolves around sales and marketing. And as soon as you start thinking of it that way, then you can come up with better reasons as to why somebody would want to do business, quote unquote, with you in a relationship.
Because this is so much about how you're showing up in relationships, right? All of these things make up how you show up. If you're not getting the response back from the world that you would like, right? If you're repelling the people that you would actually like to be attracting, for example, it's a good one. Causes a lot of feelings of rejection in people, right? Why didn't they like me? Why didn't they this? Why that? Why that? Why am I having these frustrations with people, right? If you're not getting reflected back at you what it is that you want, it's because you're not putting out there a message that's clear enough to be a match to what you actually want to be able to attract.
Right.
Right. So you're coming forward and you're not totally clear on your values, or you're not willing to really stand in your convictions relevant to your values. Right. So if I go into a relationship like, this is what I value and this is what's really important to me, A, B, C, and D, and that person's like, well, I'm not really there with you. I like G, H, and I. And you go, well, I can, I don't really need to, I don't need those things. I can get down with G, H, and I with you, right? If you are chasing being liked by people
versus respected
versus being respected by people, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to be willing to compromise on your values. You're going to compromise your standards and requirements, your boundaries, your needs and wants. And the next thing you know, you are, shoulder deep into a relationship that you feel disconnected, unwanted, and inauthentic.
I mean, it's all back to understanding who you are, right? And the vision that you have for your life and whom you desire to create that vision with. you know the answers to those questions, it makes it very, very easy to make black and white decisions rather than to dabble in the gray, right? When you dabble in the gray, you try to take on other people's visions for their life and make them your own, and hoping that you're going to find some sort of fulfillment in that, and you end up just feeling empty every single time.
Right. Or that if you're in it long enough, you'll learn to like those things or to value those things too, you know? But at the end of the day, self-abandonment is self-abandonment. And there's no way that your inner self, your spirit, your life purpose can align itself with anything that led you to self-abandonment. Right. So when it comes to really understanding how to mine, right? Mine, M-I-N-E, right? I'm talking about mining like you're a miner, because that's what you're doing, right? You're mining and aligning your culture with other people that match your cultural, let's say, requirements, standards, whatever you want to say, right? You need a value system. And within the relationship context, you have to look for shared values alignment. Yeah,
well, let's stick on your values alignment. Like, you've got to, what would those values look like? You know, some of those examples might be, how do we raise kids, right? Where do I desire to even have kids, right? Whereabout do I see myself living? Am I attached to my family in a certain way, right? So there's a lot of different things inside the value system. You know, you have to come to the table with more than just like, I bet you look good with your clothes off, right? Like, there's got to be more depth to it, right? Now, as a guy, there's got to be, you know, men tend to veer more towards the physical aspect in the beginning, right? Before I'm going to even fall in love with the way you think, I've got to be at least attracted to the way that you look. But the problem is that, you know, we all hear beauty is skin deep, and it's very true, but it's more true in the sense of like, is my vision for my life and the value system that I have, is that the same value system that you have? And if so, that's beautiful for us to create together. If it's not, there should be like, all right, this was cool, it was nice to meet you, you know, I hope maybe we'll run across you sometime, but this isn't gonna be the thing. Right.
Which is what you're referring to is a shared vision, right? A shared vision around relationship outcomes specifically. Right. Like, if one of you wants to live in the mountains and the other person wants to live on the beach, and you're really set in like, this is the lifestyle I wanted for myself and where I want to raise my kids and my family and live and work, one of you is going to have to compromise. And we've talked on another episode that the experience of compromise, again, feels like abandoning yourself. It feels like walking away from your needs. It feels like giving in. And it's really hard to feel fulfilled in a relationship where you have compromised on something very, very significant, like lifestyle.
Makes it a very tough place to come from when you're trying to generate or produce or contribute to a genuine relationship, right? Because now you're going to think to yourself, okay, you know, am I going to continue to self-abandon in the face of that? Do I mention it? Do I not mention it? What kind of conversation are we going to have about it? You know, and so it does institute a question mark of, am I really going to opt in on this, or am I going to opt out based upon this type of behavior?
And I think the other thing is, can you create buy-in in your relationships, right? Can you, because this is part of being an influential person. You know, I'm not saying that you're going to try to push someone or persuade someone to drop their value system, right? That doesn't make sense, right? At some point in time, they're going to want to pick up their own value system, and they're either going to leave the relationship or there's going to be major conflicts, right? So you would never want to push somebody into that. But you do want to create some degree of buy-in, right? You want to share relationship expectations, whatever those might be, and really see, like, should we and could we be in this together, right? I want to go in this direction. What direction would you like to go in? Oh, look, there's alignment in the directions that we would like to go. Can we go together? A lot of people don't want to or don't know how to have these conversations in the context of platonic friendships or romantic partnerships, even business partnerships, right? But that's maybe a little bit close, right? Where you've got to, you know, maybe there's some contracts involved. We want to build this type of business or whatever together, this endeavor. It's a little bit more clarity there. But when it comes to friendships and romantic partnerships, people are not talking about these things.
Even in some places where you have relational and organizational. So if you're a husband-wife duo running a business together, you've got relational culture and organizational culture, right? And you've got to be careful on how you manage those. You got to be careful on how you show up in those, which that I think is a good segue into what are some of the common breakdowns in culture that we see, right? And this is the very thing. This is number one, is people have different personalities or different egos based upon where they are. Okay. And when I say ego, I don't mean like egotistical. All right. So if that triggered you for a hot second, get over yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. All right. What I'm mentioning is that your ego, meaning you are a different person probably with your spouse than you are as a business owner, than you are as a parent, than you are as a friend, right? We all play different roles and different personalities based upon the context of our surroundings, right? So, but here's the thing. If we break this down between your business, your personal relationship, let's call it your romantic relationship, and your involvement in the community, and let's say that you have a fantastic business culture, but then you come home and you kick your dog and yell at your wife and lock your kids in their room without food, right? You've got it. Now being extreme, but you've got what we mentioned earlier is incongruence in the culture dynamics that you've created across the board. Okay. So this is a common thing that I see. Those people play different personality roles and then end up creating different culture based upon the role that they play in those environments.
Yeah, same thing. If you're thinking like, who does that? Oh my gosh, so many people. Because so many people are disconnected from themselves, and so many people are don't have a value system that they live by, that they have committed to living by on a daily basis. And they don't know who they are, right? They don't know themselves. This is your primary life's purpose should be a commitment to learning who you are and defining who you are, because it has a trickle-down effect and an impact on everything in your life that you will create. And you will create the complete opposite of what your life purpose is if you don't know who you are, right? This is where people literally marry the wrong person, right? And get into the wrong careers and all kinds of things. And why are they doing it? Because they don't know who they are. They do what other people want them to do. They fall into the dogma. They start to live by other people's belief systems, right? My parents, my grandparents, my coach, in high school, right? Like this person, my professor encouraged me to do this and said I'd be really good at that, or said my career path needs to be this because we were that in our family lineage, right?
Right.
Right. I come from a long family of military, personnel. I'm going to join the military even though I don't want to. Or I'm going to study this particular major even though I don't want to, And you are falling into the belief systems that somebody else imparted on you. You're doing what other people want you to do. Why? Because you want them to love you, like you, validate you, affirm you, accept you, authenticate you, like you're a real person.
A lot of times there is a lack of coaching. Okay, so we get into, this is organizational based one. So if you have an employee who's not doing all of the things that her job description states that she should do, right? Then we have a tendency to want to be like, well, what are you doing? How come you're not doing it? What's wrong with you? Rather than being like, hey, I just noticed that, one of your job descriptions, I work in healthcare, so let's say my front office staff, hey, Sam, I noticed that, as part of your job is to keep this lobby looking, nice and clean and tidy. So when patients come in, it's an acceptable space. And the last couple of times I've come in here, I've noticed it hasn't been that way. So can you maybe explain to me why it is that it looks like this? Is it like, are we short staffed? Do you not have enough time? Do you not understand this was part of your job? Do you need a better system in place so you have time, a designated time to do it? Help me help you.
Yeah.
Right. And then you work through that. You coach them through it. And if they still don't get it right, then you come back to them and you say, hey, look, we've had this conversation and one of two things is happening. You're either ignoring what I'm saying or you don't care. So either one of those two things leads to us needing to make a change here. So, help me understand what's going on, right? And you have these conversations with people and you help them develop their own system for coaching themselves so that the job that you need to get done gets done and they're accountable to themselves. I don't have to bang the gavel to get somebody to do something, right? You express to them how important it is. What do I need to do? How can I support you? Help them come up with their own system. And then let them be accountable to themselves, right? This is something that it gets missed a lot. We just yell at people, right? You can't do that. This John Wayne style of leadership doesn't exist anymore, right? John Wayne meaning rough, tough, and don't take no shit off nobody kind of thing. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, people still want to be that person,
right.
Not only in their business, but also in their relationships,
right.
And, this is the difference between educating a child, who's behaving badly and saying your behavior is bad or your behavior is unacceptable in this context, rather than you are bad, right? You are a bad person. You are a bad boy or a bad girl, right? Those are really two very different, distinct messages, right? You are a bad husband or a bad wife versus this behavior is not behavior that I'm willing to accept in a relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Very different things. They have a very different type of impact. Again, part of the culture, though, that you're creating, right?
Mm-hmm.
What experience do you want people to have in relationship with you? And when I say people, I'm including everyone, including your kids, your employees, your friends, your romantic partner or partners, right? Whatever that is, what experience do you want them to have in relationship with you? And if the experience is one of that makes them feel diminished, that makes them feel like they are a bad person, like they are not enough, like they can't ever get anything right in order to please you, that is a reflection of you and how you're coming across, right? Or not coming across.
Very true.
Right? Because many people do not have communication skills in the range of good to excellent. Most people do not have that.
Right.
And even if they do have good communication skills, they're not utilizing them properly within the context that they should be utilized, right? So, let's say in the relationship with their spouse, you hear this often. It's like, we've been together long enough. You should know, right? You should remember that I either want or like or don't like, or that this thing needs to happen at these dates and times, right?
Right.
Rather than understanding like, hey, maybe your partner is also really busy and they would appreciate a friendly and kind reminder.
Accountability reminder.
Right. And that is a loving thing to do.
Right.
Right. An expression of love to be like, hey, don't forget such and such, rather than you remembering, knowing that they're going to forget, letting the thing happen where they actually forget and going, yeah, I knew it. You know why? Because you're a bad husband. Right? And a lot of people are doing that. Please stop, because you're making your partner feel like they're not enough.
And then along the same lines too, you have things like expectations, right? Unmet expectations happen, so we get into think about this way. When you have a job, the job lines out a description of expectations that you're supposed to follow, right? So I need you to make sure you're here on time. This is this policy. This is this procedure. This is how we do this. And then you leave. Bye out, right? And then, but why don't we do that in our relational culture as well? Why don't we do that? Why don't we say, and I'm not saying, I used a schedule as an example, and I'm not saying that, hey, we're going to schedule our lives in our relational culture, so don't go so literal with me there. But what I mean though is, how come we don't outline expectations, right? How come we don't tell people, hey, you know what? I would really appreciate getting a note from you every day. I would really appreciate I really have this expectation that I'm never going to fill up my gas tank because you're going to do it for me. Right? And some people might be like, oh, I'm not going to date somebody like that. Then fine, don't.
Right.
But if they have that expectation and that value is not good for you, then you know that, right? This person wants me to coddle them, right? If that's not good for you, fine. But at least line out your expectations, right? Describe what it is that you want. And then when they describe it and you really want to be there, what do? You deliver it, right? So why don't people create the same type of expectations, right? Job description, job expectations. Relationship description, no expectations. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Why does that happen like that?
Right. I think it's because most people don't have a personal vision for their own life. And when you have a personal vision for your life and you also have a goal or desire to have a life partner, then in your own life vision, you have space for that person.
Right.
Right? Like you have this idea in your vision of like, I want a partner who is this way and wants these things too. So when you don't have that and you're dating, you just start to fall back on like physical attraction and chemistry and other components that are relatively superficial, right? Like, oh, they're a Christian and me too. They're from this town and so am I, right? Like we're the same generation. We both like pizza, right? Like you start to fall back on superficial stuff when you don't have a vision for your life and you don't have any idea of what is the context and the added value that a life partner can bring into your experience, and that you're willing to reciprocate. That is a huge one, right? You have to have the willingness to reciprocate that, because nobody's going to swoop into your life and save you and make it better and, close up all the holes that you might have in things that you don't like either about yourself or about your life experience, and be totally fine not getting anything in return.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made that distinction, because you can't line up your list of expectations and then be unwilling to hear the other person's, right?
Yeah.
We've said this on every episode this season, I believe, and it's you get into relationships to give, not to get. Okay, so understanding somebody else's expectations is so that you can deliver it to them. And so you also give them the space, as you mentioned, to talk about their expectations, so then you can give it to them, right? Relational culture failure happens, I would say, 90% of the time just because of unmet expectations.
Uncommunicated also.
Yeah, I was going to say, and those get unmet because they're not communicated.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And this is the issue, right? So am I telling you to approach your relationships like an organizational culture, like a job? No. But what I am saying is take some of those rules, right? And adapt them in a relational way so that you can develop proper ways of communicating and proper ways of delivering on each other's expectations. If you missed the episode on boundaries versus barriers, go back and check it out. I think it's the second episode of this season, but it's really, really good. And we talk about how your boundaries can accentuate your life and increase your presence, and barriers are things that are going to steal from you. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm not even going to try to say anything after that. There's no reason for me to. So we encourage you guys. We'd love to connect with you guys. So if you would go to Edgy Entrepreneurs, plural with an S.com, you can check out the blog that we put out every week. You can also reach us directly if you want to send an email in, ask questions, offer up some different solutions, or even suggestions on things you'd like to hear us talk about. We always love connecting with you guys. And we also have a lovely text message group that you can join, right?
Yeah, if you text the word Edgy, EDGY, text Edgy to 33777, you will receive a text message with a link directly to join our Facebook community, where we go live and we share even more, and you can interact directly with us, and we do live coaching every week.
Beautiful. Awesome. We'll see you guys next time. Take care and go create amazing cultures for your relationships and for your business.